Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to speak here today at AMLD Africa. My name is Engineer Bainomugisha from Makerere University. And today I'll speak about leveraging machine learning to achieve clean air in African cities. And this is the work from the project that we're implementing here at Makerere University called Airco in Kampala, Uganda. So why air pollution? So air pollution is increasingly becoming a big problem in many African cities. In fact, it's one of the major environmental public health risks at the moment, affecting many urban areas in African cities. To put this into context, the recent statistics from the World Health Organization shows that over 7 million people die every year from exposure to dangerous levels of air pollution. And unfortunately, these exposures and these deaths are mostly happening in low and middle income countries, where, of course, Africa falls. So in the picture here, what we see, if you look at the representation of where these mortality rates are high, as you can see, Africa, most of the African countries, the number of deaths per 100,000 people is in the range of above 160 people dying due to illnesses related to air pollution. So this is clearly an increasing challenge, and compared to a number of other health issues like malnutrition, illnesses associated to unsafe water, air pollution still comes out as a major issue. And therefore, we need to come in and tackle this problem. So one of the steps in addressing air pollution is quantifying the magnitude, how bad or how good the air quality is. Unfortunately, many African cities and many African governments, they actually don't have the data on the magnitude of the air pollution exposures for the citizens. There's a lot of many gaps, data gaps in African cities regarding the magnitude of the air pollution challenge. And as you can see in the picture here, the map taken from one of the mapping websites on air pollution monitoring across the world, each of the nodes there in the map shows some of the public available data points for air pollution. And obviously you can see there's a high concentration of these monitoring stations in many high-income countries, but the African continent is largely unmonitored. And there is a reason to this. Why is it that we don't have air quality data on African cities? So the reason for this, as we found out during our work, is that the traditional ways of quantifying air quality relies on heavy or expensive equipment. And these equipment are impractical in many ways for many African cities. First of all, it costs over hundreds of thousands of dollars to set up and maintain. And they also assume certain infrastructure to be available, such as constant access to power, electricity, reliable internet connectivity, local expertise, and many others. So these are key barriers for many African cities and governments to do air quality monitoring on a regular basis to be able to inform policy and decision making. And these challenges informed the work that we are doing here at Airco. How can we fill in these data gaps so that we know where the pollution levels are, at what magnitude in the different places that matter for the people who live in these cities? So about 5 years ago, we started this project called Airco. And because of the challenges around the traditional monitoring methods, we decided to study the context we are in. We created custom air quality monitors we call Airco. And these Airco monitors have been designed in a way that we can deploy them to work in the context that we work in here in many African cities. So for example, we know that many African cities struggle with constant power supply. And therefore, we looked at possibilities on how we can power these monitors using solar energy. We also realized that many of these cities, they don't have access to regular Wi-Fi connectivity to transmit the data. And therefore, we assessed how we can leverage cellular connectivity that's available in many parts of the African countries. And also we know that most of these cities are characterized by dust and extreme weather conditions. So we also looked at ways on how we can optimize these monitors, be able to withstand these extreme weathers, but also things like insects, dust, and so on, that we can deploy these devices in the field, but it still give us air quality data. So these devices measure what we call particulate matter. Particulate matter is one of the key indicators of air quality, and particulate matter represents smaller particles, which are small enough to get into the bloodstream of human beings. And when breathed in, they can cause a lot of human health challenges. So we, based on these parameters, we came up with the Airco monitor. And the other elements of this system was around how do we deploy this system. So we explored two models. We could deploy these devices on static locations, like as you can see there in the picture on the right side. But you can also deploy these devices on mobile objects. So on the left side of the picture there, that's an Airco monitor deployed on a motorcycle, powered by the alternator of the motorcycle. So as the motorcycle is riding about, the device is getting charged. It's also collecting data. It's collecting data that can quantify the exposure for these riders, the passengers, but also the locations where they move to. And this mobile monitoring was very important for us because we did not have enough resources to put monitors everywhere. And being able to leverage available infrastructure, it means that we could be able to monitor at a larger scale, more than we could actually be able to achieve by putting monitors everywhere. So taken together, this is how the Airco system looks like. So over time, we have deployed over 100 sensors across the different parts of the city in combination with the mobile monitoring that is able to go to different parts of the city. And together we have collected about 36 million records of air quality data on the different parts of the city at different times of the day. And we also have been actively working with the cities and the governments to see how we can generate the insights from the data to be able to inform measures that can improve air quality in African cities. Particularly, for example, in Uganda here, we have worked closely with the National Environment Authority to provide insights that have led into the formulation of the draft Ugandan National Air Quality Standards. And we hope that this is one of the first steps that the cities can take to improve air quality, because most of the African cities, because of the lack of the data and evidence, they actually don't have policies and the standards on how to regulate air pollution. And once we have the data, then we can actually inform regulation. And we've also been actively undertaking activities on how we can use the insights from the data to inform public education and awareness. As you can see in the picture there, that's one of the products that's available to citizens and the authorities. They can get in and see the pollution levels in different parts of the city. You can see the current trend, but also you can look at the forecast. How does the pollution look like in the next few days? And parents, for instance, can take this information to make decisions on when to actually take the children out, or schools when to let the children go out and play to minimize exposure to dangerous levels of air pollution. So how are we leveraging machine learning? How can machine learning help in this work? So one of the key areas we're applying machine learning is on improving the data accuracy from the low cost sensor network. And this is what we call calibration. So low cost sensors, they have their inefficiencies in that sometimes they might not report the same data as the grade reference monitors. However, we've discovered that by applying machine learning methods and collocating these low-cost sensors with the grade reference monitors, we are able to achieve the quality of data that is acceptable for decision making. And what we have there is an example on how we apply machine learning for calibration. So we have we'll collocate our sensors with the grade reference monitors, and then take into account other parameters like humidity, temperature, location, time of the day, and the others to try and improve the accuracy of the measurement from the local sensors. And what we can see there on the right side is that after calibration, we're able to have the low-cost sensors tracking very well with the grade reference monitors, which costs hundreds of dollars more expensive to set up and maintain compared to the Airco monitor, which averages at about $200 to set up and manage. We're also leveraging machine learning to be able to detect failures in the network. Once you have a network of 100 sensors, then maintenance is also very important to ensure data quality, and being able to identify which sensors are likely to fail, which sensors need urgent maintenance. Has also been one of the areas that we are exploring. The other aspect of machine learning is being able to predict air pollution levels in locations where we don't have monitors. So given a location A, or a certain location in the city, how can we be able to know the pollution levels in other parts of the city where we do not have the physical devices? So we are also leveraging on these techniques to be able to predict pollution in space, and also forecast in the future to be able to inform decision making around either minimizing exposure, or for policymakers to be able to take decisions to improve air quality. And these insights have actually been embedded in one of the city's dashboards where the mayors and the decision makers are using this information. We're also leveraging machine learning to optimize the sensor placement. So once you have a given city, how do we know that we need to have new sensors in these locations? So this is one of the ways we are also exploring on how we can optimize the number of sensors on the network to manage the costs of deployment, but also ensure that we get the optimal sensing. We don't oversense, or we don't undersense a given city. That concludes my presentation, and I welcome any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Engineer, for your great presentation. I don't know if you attended Isan Griesch's talk a bit earlier today, but she presented something quite similar. So I'm wondering whether maybe you guys should collaborate at some points. We don't have questions in the chat yet. Let me just ask you a question. So Airco, how many cities is Airco already covering, and what are your development plans for other cities maybe?
Yeah, thanks. Good question. Definitely there's opportunity to collaborate with the other people working in this space. In terms of the coverage, in Uganda in Uganda, we currently cover greatly Kampala, which is the main city, but we are rolling out to other 2 new cities in Uganda. In terms of the future plans, the future plan is to expand this network to other African cities. We are in discussion with partners in Nairobi and Accra to expand the Airco network to these other parts of African cities. And what we discover is that it's not sufficient to deploy one sensor in a city, but you need to deploy a sufficient number of sensors in the city, and then alongside that, have active engagement with the communities, active engagement with the city governments, so that it's not just an activity of monitoring, but also the insights being generated are actually being used to inform policy decisions to reduce air pollution in those cities. Thank you.
Very interesting. And maybe one last question on my side. So you mentioned that there is an issue with data collection because data is lacking. And this is a recurring theme that we have observed in today's, all the talks from today, I think. I'm wondering if there are other barriers that prevent you from deploying your system.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. Obviously, deploying a sensor network within any city, there are many issues to deal with. One of the things that we discover is that you cannot just get into a new city and start putting boxes of monitors on locations. So what we find that you need to have the buy-in from the stakeholders. And these stakeholders are not necessarily only people with authority, but also the communities. Because what we see is that for the community members to appreciate the value of this work, they actually need to be involved in the efforts. And actually, some of our monitors are located on people's buildings, people's homes, people's business premises. So what we do is, what we see as a barrier is that there's always that effort on how you can bring on board, when you can get the buy-in from the stakeholders. So we work closely with the members of the public to allow us to place the sensors on their device, on their premises. But by doing that, they are also being aware of what the pollution is about and being seen as stakeholders in undertaking, implementing the project rather than only the consumers of the data. For the government agencies, in terms of the barrier there, we've had to go in and introduce the value. Unfortunately, most of these city agencies do not have any active air quality programs. And once you explain the magnitude of the issue, then they actually appreciate that they need to have this as a priority in their cities. So that's how some of the barriers we have faced and how we've been able to maintain. Of course, also maintaining a network comes at a cost. Therefore, you need to also have some resources to ensure that you can maintain data collection. Thank you.